Hello, and thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Code with Lilly Code. Today I'm going to be speaking about how I got into computer science and what were the steps I took to get here. So, how did I become a full stack developer? Back in 2012, I graduated with a double honours degree in biology and computer science and continued my learning by doing a master's in immunology and global health. I continued in that field for 5 years and then I realised that field wasn't really for me. So I'd like to start with the caveat that I do have a degree in computer science, although I don't think this is necessary at all for anybody that wants to get into the industry. That's something I firmly believe in. I can give you the tips, some websites and tricks, how to get your skills up and how to learn, but I'll just start with my own experience and how it evolved. I did do a double honours degree back in 2012 in an Irish university, and from there continued my master's in immunology and global health. So that was my own story. For 5 years I worked in the pharmaceutical industry before deciding that path wasn't really for me. So because I had this second degree in computer science, it was just a no-brainer, something simple. I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest, but it was something for me to fall back on. And that's when the learning came in. And this is where anybody can get started, in my opinion. Really, I really do honestly, truly believe that. And I really want to stress that because I don't want anyone to think they need a degree in order to get into this industry. There's a lot of people that are doing it without degrees. It's a very feasible route. A lot of people have done it without the degree route. So you don't need to go back to college and do 4 years to get a degree. There's loads of online courses, training, boot camps that you can get involved in, which I'll go through all of these and let you know which I recommend and which I don't. At the end of the day, you do not need to go back to college and have a degree. I just happened to have it. It was something for me to fall back on. Once I decided I didn't want to be in pharmaceuticals anymore, I just started learning coding again by myself religiously. So it did take a lot of work. It was a lot of effort, but it was so worth it. I have a good job now. I don't need to worry about financial issues. It's a fantastic career path. There's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of opportunity. I would highly recommend it to anyone that has an inkling that they enjoy coding or something that they'd like to explore, because it really is a worthwhile skill worth learning. And if I had kids myself, I think I would have them learning this from the get-go, because if they know about this and if they're adept at it, they're going to get a job. So it's one thing you just don't need to worry about. It's a skill that needs to be learned like any other, and that's really the end of it. I started to code in the evenings and just get up my skills. This is something that anybody can do with an hour a day, 2 hours a day. It'll take time, but it's really a valuable skill worth learning. So I started with Free Code Camp, which is a fantastic online free resource that brings you right the way through HTML, CSS, and then onto your JavaScript, which that's all the languages I really know. Obviously at this stage now, 3 years in, I've touched on other things. I've learned PHP, I've done other bits here and there. I know MySQL, which are just things you pick up along the way. You'll pick these up as you go. But if you have them 3 basics, you are in a really, really good position to start building projects. You can build a website. You can really move a lot of things with that, get a portfolio set up, and that's what's going to get you a job, in my opinion. That's what I started to do. I just spent a year, 2 years, really doing this every evening. I was very diligent. I will say that it takes time and it takes effort. Because I was changing career and I knew I didn't want to continue in pharmaceuticals, it was very important for me to figure this out and to figure out how am I going to get into a better position for myself and something that I'd prefer to be doing. One thing I will say is that if you enjoy this, if it's something that you just have a bit of a liking to, then it's so much easier. I was very much so forcing myself to do this thing. Every skill takes time to learn and there's a growth period. Sometimes it's not so comfortable. Sometimes you're not just jumping into it and easy to just pick it up. It takes time and effort, and sometimes you'll really enjoy it. Other times it will be very frustrating. But if you can have the due diligence in yourself to just know, I do know this, that it will pay off, then it's worth the time and effort that it takes to put in. So it's just about getting yourself into a good habit more than anything, keeping yourself accountable, and then you can really do anything. That's my honest opinion. So I started with Free Code Camp and I just got my skills up in the evening. I kept practicing coding and eventually I got enough skills that things started to click for me. So you would think with a college degree there wouldn't be a need to go and do all this coding and studying and training, but realistically I had got my degree quite far in the past. Off the back of this then, I really didn't remember any of the coding, to be honest, very little of it. Also, in my degree, the majority of the learning was all theory. There was so much theory. We had got coding sessions once a week, but I was never the best at them. I used to get help from the lads in my class, so I was never flying along with the coding sessions. So it was something that I really did have to relearn and learn properly. It wasn't even relearning it, it was just learning it. I had a bit of theory somewhere knocking around in my brain. So I started with free code camp and I just got my skills up in the evening. I kept practicing coding and eventually I got enough skills that things started to click for me. Once I'd got through the teething period and had things set up and was starting to get used to things and the way things operated and the folder structures and how to add things to projects and very small changes, I first started with PHP and Laravel. I was on this for maybe 2 months and I said, I don't really think this is your cup of tea, Leanne. I don't really think this is your cup of tea. Maybe we'll try something else. So I had to go with the Angular framework and JavaScript. I went home, I did the tutorials, I tried to learn more about it, I tried to get myself up to scratch, as well as working 8 hours a day and also just trying to upskill as much as possible. It was really stressful in the beginning because I honestly hadn't got a clue. But it came with time, and look at me now, now I'm working in my 3rd job as a developer. It's all going great. I'm learning more and more every day, and I have the confidence to communicate this to you to avoid you going through the same thing. So with practice and time, you will be able to do anything. Really, you really will. So please believe me on that. With practice and time, you can achieve anything because you got my backing. So the Laravel didn't go too well, so I moved on to the Angular framework, which was much better. For some reason, I think it was just them extra few months trying to get used to the coding, and perhaps it did just click easier for me, but there was also more months learning behind me. So when Angular came around and I started to learn that, it went a little bit smoother. It still didn't go smooth, but it went smoother. Then once I had this under my belt, I decided it was time for me to go home. I was ready to move back to Ireland and get a job at home. So I started looking into other jobs because after 2.5 years living in Malta, I was ready to come home. So I started looking for jobs back in Ireland, and after a couple of months of applying for jobs, getting refused, getting turned down, really don't see this as a bad thing if you're on a job hunt, because it is inevitable and it just happens. After a couple of months, I did get word back from a job in Dublin town, which was brilliant for me. I was delighted. In order to get the role, I had to go through 3 interview rounds. The first round was an online interview where I spoke with the manager and a couple of managers on the team, my own direct line manager and another manager who was actually based in England, and we just had a conversation. This is how the first interview normally goes. You discuss your CV with your employer. In the computer industry, what I've experienced is this is how the interviews normally go. In the first round of the interview, you'll speak about your CV. So that's what I did, and this is my big piece of advice for anybody going for an interview. For that first interview and for any interview, as soon as you start going through the interview process, learn off your CV. Practice it in the mirror. Go over saying it to yourself in the mirror. My first job was blah blah blah. This is the experience I got, and know how to ream that off. As you speak about it, you'll start to realise you've left out technologies. There's other things you can talk about. Once you've practiced this, you'll be surprised at how little things pop up into your mind that you can then add to it. So when you do have that first call, which they always ask you to go through your CV, you will be a genius. You'll be able to ream it off, one box ticked, and you can move on then. So it's really brilliant. Then the second round interview was a technical test. So it was an Angular test. I had to go through the test and build and add additional features to an Angular project. So that's what I did. After the second round interview, I was actually told by my manager at that time that you don't have enough skills. This is really a little bit over your head. I can see you do have a lot of experience in Angular, but I don't think you have the technical skills. And I said, I fully understand where you're coming from, but I am someone who will put in the effort. I will learn this. I will put in all the time after work. I'll make sure I get up there. I would love the opportunity, but I really appreciate the feedback. That's what came out of my mouth, and it was true. So one thing he had picked up on is that from once you start going through the tutorials in Angular and you start getting a little bit up to scratch with it and you start to learn a little bit about it, things like how to structure your folders and where to put different parts of your code, that'll actually start coming naturally. You'll realize that and learn that as you go through different tutorials. So it's really valuable, and picking it up as I went along. So these are little things that you'll pick up yourself, and if you're willing to learn more, you're just in a good position to get the job like I did. That was the second round interview. Then I moved on to the third round interview, which was an interview with the top people in the company and my manager. And once that all went well, eventually I was offered the job. I was so delighted. I literally ran down the street in Malta screaming at the top of my lungs. I rang my dad. I was like, I got the job, I'm coming home. I was over the moon. I was so delighted and so excited. It was brilliant. I still remember that day to the T. I was bawling, crying and everything. I was just so happy. So I moved to Ireland and started my job. I was in that job for just under 2 years, and that's when I decided I really wanted to learn more. At this stage now, I want to be challenged more. I also wanted a team where there was more interaction. I could interact with more people, get advice, discuss things, and I just wasn't really getting that where I previously was. So I started to go on the job hunt again and found my current position, which I've only been in for 3 weeks. It's still the third week now. So I've only been in it for 3 weeks and it's going so well. It's a huge company. They have a lot of input and a lot of assistance for you. Another guy started on the same day as me and we were assigned a buddy, which is somebody who you can ask questions. If you're stuck, there's someone who you can refer to. I never had that before, which is a really helpful system, because if you get stuck, you don't want to be annoying your manager and asking silly questions necessarily, but no question is silly. We all have to learn. We all have to start somewhere. So now I'm in this current role and I'm starting with a new framework, the React framework, which I'm really excited about because they're both JavaScript frameworks, which will allow me to deepen my JavaScript knowledge and just get more of a feel for a different framework. I didn't necessarily feel like I was ready to move away from Angular, because there's still a lot more to learn there. I know I could really get much better at Angular. I've learned a lot of it. I can do all of the basic things, but there's some more complex things I might not do ideally or in the perfect way, but it's all learning. So I'm really excited now to be starting a new framework and to get a bit more experience in another area, to just compound my learning, add something else to my CV, learn something new, be excited again about it all. So that's the position I'm in now. And that's my coding journey. That's how I went from working in the pharmaceutical industry to move through to coding. It's my personal journey. I've given some bits of tips and advice along the way, but really this was just a video to explain my journey, how I got here. If there's any specific questions you'd like to know, and I'll also do other videos speaking specifically about the training route that you should go down if you want to get into coding, resources I'd recommend, and different pieces of reading, YouTube channels, books, and online resources that you can use if this is a road you'd like to go down too. I'll also be including coding videos, bug fixing videos, and more general career and programming tutorials and videos. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you all. I wish you all the best in your coding journey. And any questions, comments, let me know. I'll get back to you and I'll advise you. I'll even do a video if there's something you'd like me to do a video on. If you did like this content, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and I wish you all a blessed day. In my spare time, working in pharmaceutical. And if you did enjoy this content as much as, well,